Support for this podcast comes from MathWorks, a company accelerating the pace of engineering and science. Stick around until the end of this episode for a special segment about how companies like Nuvera Fuel Cells use MathWorks software to design engineered systems powering the clean energy transition.
WBUR Podcasts, Boston.
I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and you're listening to The Common. Tenant leader with City Life Vida Urbana, Selena Eutsay. Welcome to The Common.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you're here because we are at a very busy time of year for the city of Boston because September 1st is creeping up on us. And that's when a lot of people are moving into the city. In 2019, the city of Boston estimated that 70% of leases begin that day. So we got you here to talk to us about renters' rights.
Right.
You know, what do people need to know when they're moving into their new place? Or what do they need to know if they might be having trouble in the place that they're currently in? You know, don't plan on moving. Then, after we talk to you, we're going to hear from some renters themselves. But first, Selena, I would love for you to talk to us about what you do at City Life.
At City Life, I'm a part of the leadership committee, and also I'm a member of my tenant organization in my community where I live, and try to keep it going right.
And what's that called?
So I live in St. Joseph's Community Co-op.
Where's that?
It's located in Roxbury. It's one of the oldest co-ops in Roxbury. It's been around since 1969. And right now we're going through some changes. And, you know, gentrification and all that's coming around. And we are a co-op, which is privately owned. And we're run by a board of directors. And things are not going right. Tenants are being evicted, intimidated and stuff within our community. And so me as a leader are trying to get members together so that this won't happen and we could get our neighborhood together like it used to be 50 years ago.
You're very busy.
Yes, busy.
And so you brought us to my next question. So you've lived in Boston a long time. Throughout the years, what's it been like living here as a resident? Whether you've had an apartment, now you have a co-op, right? So like, what's it been like through the years living in Boston?
I mean, when I was raising my children, we had rent control. You know, I could live in an apartment, pay a couple $100, you know, on my income. You know, I didn't have any help or anything like that, but I could live. You know, nowadays, it's really hard. The average person, you know, I would say even making six figures, because I know people making six figures, it's hard for them to rent an apartment because more than 30% of your income is going into your home. You know, the average one-bedroom apartment could go over $2,000, and guess what? It's not that 800 square feet anymore. You know, it could be chopped up. And if it is your older unit, like Boston does have a lot of beautiful older units, they're not well maintained. And so then we come into the problem of landlord abuse or, you know, landlord neglect. And so, you know, you're living in uninhabitable conditions and you're fighting for that. I mean, with rent increase and not having rent control, it makes it harder for the average working person, middle-class working person to live here, not alone the indigent person living in Boston. You know, many people have lived here all their lives, and that's why we have our people living on the street. They work every day, but when it comes to paying that rent every month, they can't do it.
Yeah, so having said that, it can be tough to live here in Boston. Let's get into some of the tools to help people get through it as best they can. So let's say it's September 1st, you're moving in. What are some of the first things you would tell that tenant who's, you know, moving their couch into to their new place?
Most important things people need to know is they have rights, okay? You have a right to negotiate your rent. You have a right to do a walkthrough to your unit. And if you see anything wrong, you know, you note it down and you talk with your landlord about it. And, you know, and hopefully you all can resolve that issue.
What are landlords obligated to provide tenants under the law here in Boston?
Heat and hot water, a safe and sound living environment, an up-to-date fire extinguisher, working smoke detectors,
When you say heat and water, working heat and water.
I thought, working,
Yep.
Working heat and hot water.
So let's say you run into an issue with the landlord under any of these. What's the process you go through to get it taken care of?
Well,
to hold the landlord accountable.
That's correct. Okay. First of all, you always want to write things down, and have a trail of, your dealings with the landlord. You always want to have a paper trail. Mm-hmm. So if you have a problem, I would say, your first immediate thing is to email or text, immediately tell the landlord about your issue. But then I would go and seek help. Get educated on what are my rights. And that's where City Life Vida Urbana comes into. You could go there and you could get educated about your rights as tenant. We also have attorneys and we have leaders that are there to help you through the process.
One thing I learned recently as a renter is don't be afraid to ask. Mm-hmm. In my apartment, I had these blinds that were old and dirty, and I was dealing with them for a long time because I was like, I'll get to it at some point. But I just finally got to a point where I'm like, I need to change my blinds. And I even ordered some new blinds and everything. And then I'm walking in my hallway in my building, and I see blinds in the hallway as they're working on other apartments. And I go, do they provide the blinds here? So, I sent an email and asked, and sure enough, they're like, yeah, we provide the blinds. And so I asked them if they could switch them out, got some new blinds.
Right.
So the lesson for me was ask. Don't be afraid to ask,
And that's correct. What I want to tell you, see, the thing about it is anything that they supply in your unit as far as blinds, shades, or anything, once that's in your unit, and yes, they're responsible for it. So nowadays, a lot of landlords are not putting things like refrigerators in your units or blinds and stuff in your new units because they don't want to be responsible for it. But you better believe anything they put, from refrigerator to blinds, even if they put a carpet, a lot of people have wall-to-wall carpets. Their carpets get mold and mildew and they ask their landlord to fix it. And guess what? They don't want to do it. And that's become a problem. But anything a landlord has in your unit is supposed to be fixable. And you're right, ask.
And I'm curious, as you answered that question, I'm curious to know, what problems do you typically run into at City Life Vida Urbana?
Wow, rent increases. We run into rent increases and living conditions, mold, rodents. We know that our city has become, rehabilitated now, and new housing is coming up and old housing is going down. Like I said, I live in Roxbury. The old bus barn that used to be there has now come down. But now we have an infestation of rats, rodents coming through there. So that causes them to come into our homes and, people getting sick and stuff. So, yeah, things like that.
I want to jump to a scenario where perhaps things have gotten really tough for a tenant and say they're facing eviction. Take us through what they need to know if they're in that situation.
Okay, first of all, what they need to do is they need to get educated. Mm-hmm. They need to get educated on what the eviction process is. The first part of an eviction is getting a 30, 60, and 90-day notice to quit. A lot of people get scared and intimidated, and they're ready to move out. We tell people, do not move out your home. Only a judge can evict you. That is one thing we want you to know. When you get that notice, do not move until a judge say, you have to leave. A lot of people are not being evicted from non-payment of rent. They're being evicted because there's problems within their unit, or the landlords are trying to go up on their rent dramatically, like $500, $1,000. I'm not talking about $50, $100.
Lately, I've been seeing this idea of tenant unions pop up a lot. What are your thoughts on that?
Wow, just like I said, I'm a leader of a tenant unit.
Right. There we go.
I think they're great. I mean, you need to be proactive and start it from the beginning. I think anybody that's living in a dwelling, whether it's 2 units or more, I think you should start a tenant unit. If you have a tenant unit, you have more power. Where they say there's numbers, there's powers.
Before we go, because this conversation has been geared towards the tenant, right? I'm just curious to know, what would you say to landlords during this time if they're listening to this?
What would I say, a landlord? I would say put yourself in the tenant's shoe. okay? I know that you have to pay mortgage. I know you have to maintain your property, but it's called a working relationship, okay? And it starts from the move-in time. If you find or if you accept a tenant, as your tenant, you have did your due diligence to say this is the one I want, I would say work with them, because we all have to live. And so, be mindful. Don't have greed get to you. Because nowadays there's so many federal and city funds, that they could get to upkeep their property, to do things for their property, that they don't have to come after the tenant, And if they have problems, talk to your tenant. Most tenants will listen. And that's what we do at City Life Vida Urbana. We listen. Mm-hmm. And we try to be the go-between. We are the negotiators. So that's why I do say, we even tell landlords, come. We want the landlords to get educated so they can have a different mindset also. So I would tell all landlords, tenants, come to City Life Vida Urbana. Get educated.
You are screaming City Life Vida Urbana from the mountaintops. You representing it here today.
Only because, I didn't want to go at first. I had a friend that she's a part of City Life that said to me, go. And I'm like, I don't need City Life. I mean, what? But you know what? It educated me. And it helped me, and I'm helping many of people today. Even landlords, we have homeowners, and I just want to shout this out. We have homeowners that are losing theirs. They're not tenants, but they're in need. So they have tenants that have problems. They come to us, and they get educated, and they have more empathy, more sympathy for their tenants, and they work it out.
Selena, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Next, we're going to hear from a few Boston area renters about their challenges being a tenant. We'll be right back.
Electricity, a big idea that's inspired countless new ones. From powering the light bulb to virtually powering our entire lives. 30 years ago, State Street launched the Spider S&P 500 ETF, SPY. A big idea that inspired the world to invest differently, and still does. What can you do with SPY?
Before investing, consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses. Visit ssga.com for a prospectus containing this and other information. Read it carefully before investing. SPY is subject to risks similar to those of stocks. All ETFs are subject to risk, including possible loss of principal. Alps Distributors, Inc. Distributor.
Support for this podcast comes from MathWorks, the leading developer of mathematical computing software that accelerates innovation by allowing companies to test technology virtually.
They're able to understand how that system's going to work before they start to begin building hardware systems.
Stick around until the end of this episode for a special segment about how model-based design is helping engineers, scientists, and academics solve today's energy challenges.
Politics has never been stranger or more online, which is why the politics team at Wired is making a new show, Wired Politics Lab. It's all about how to navigate the endless stream of news and information and what to look out for. Each week on the show, we'll dig into far-right platforms, AI chatbots, influencer campaigns, and so much more. Wired Politics Lab launches Thursday, April 11th. Follow the show wherever you get your podcasts.
And we're back. Ahead of the big move-in day, we want to keep the conversation going here, so Common producer Frannie Monahan went out to Allston and the Charles River Promenade to talk to some folks about the struggles of renting in the Boston area. I should mention, most people who shared their stories weren't comfortable using their full names since they are still currently renting. So, most will be identified by their first name only, starting with Carlina from West Somerville.
we had mold growing in our basement. It's like in August we told them about it. They didn't fix it till December. And then they gave us a renewal fee of $250 when we renewed again for the same lease. And we haven't heard about that for any other company that did it.
My name is Kivia, and I've lived in Boston for around 10 years, and I lived in Roxbury for most of it. I actually just started my renting journey probably May.
How's it going so far?
I think it's going good, but right now that I'm moving again and trying to find somewhere to stay, even as a student, it's a lot because housing insecurity is real. Even as a young adult wanting to leave home and just be my own person, it's just I don't know, I feel it's not accommodating for the younger adults. They want credit scores and co-signers and all these things that we're just being introduced to.
My name's Jalea. I live in Dorchester, and I've lived in Dorchester all my life, literally born and raised. I live with my mom and my sister, and we've lived in the same house for almost 10 years now. It's sad to see the gentrification over time around it, and how the price just always keeps going up regardless of anything. It's really hard to imagine how we're gonna be able to afford these high pricing in Boston. Even a studio is by itself $3,000. It's very stressful. And I think that as much as I love Boston and Boston is beautiful, I would definitely want to explore out of it.
Hi, my name is Namdi Onike. I've been living in Boston for about 3 years. I've been renting here in Allston for about 2 years, but I'm about to move out. If I had to point to a main issue, I'd say definitely rodents. I rented out a house with 4 of the roommates, and we called pest control and everything, and just due to the structure of the houses, it's just not really possible to keep mice out. We literally had mice everywhere, and this wasn't really an issue subjected to us. All of our friends living all around, not even just Allston, Back Bay too. Mice were a really big issue.
I too live in Brighton. I'm not going to tell you what my name is just for ha-has. No, I've had some really bad times living in Boston over the last 10 years. I moved from Western Mass, where things are a little bit more renter friendly, or at least they were when I lived there. And it's just been dog eat dog. And as soon as there's an excuse to wean a little bit more out of you, the renter or the landlords try to do it. And they refuse to actually take care of their places and their units. So you just kind of left in squalor the longer you live in a building, and the landlords don't come to your assistance to help you out.
So my name's Morgan, and I've lived in Boston for 2 years, and all of those 2 years has been in Allston, Brighton. I had moved here from Maryland, and I had no idea that the street I lived on, the parking lots, were not for my apartment building. So my first night here, I went and parked my car in a parking lot and came out in the morning and it was gone. And I had to walk around and find the towing place, but I did meet some friends on the way to the towing place. They wanted to comfort me because I was just crying walking down the street. And they're my best friends now.
Anything on your mind as we wait for September 1st?
Sure. Allston Christmas is upon us. Please go look for stuff. I've gotten a great couple of plushies that I didn't expect to pick up off the side of the street, but then I washed them and they look brand new. I'll also be putting stuff out there because I'm trying to give stuff away too, so come collect my stuff.
Thanks to everybody who shared their story about being a renter here in the Boston area. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Common. If you like what you're hearing, head on over to Instagram at WBUR The Common. Send us a message. You can also send us an email at thecommon@wbur.org. And now it's that time for me to let you know that The Common is produced by Frannie Monahan. It's mixed by Emily Jankowski and Paul Vikas. And it's edited by Samatha Joshi and Ben Brock Johnson. And our theme music is Me by Hisu. And from the newsroom of WBUR, I'm your host, Daryl C. Murphy. I'll talk to you soon.
Support for this podcast comes from MathWorks, accelerating the pace of discovery, innovation, development, and learning in engineering and science. Listen on for a story of how one company is using MathWorks software to help the planet.
The transportation sector is one of the largest contributors of greenhouse gases, and a lot of that is from maritime transport.
Yeah, maritime transport creates a huge amount of carbon dioxide, about 900 million tons annually.
That's Gus Block, Corporate Development Director at Nuvera Fuel Cells, who explains that 90% of all foreign goods are transported through ports and container ships, most of which run on diesel. But Nuvera is working on a way to electrify this system through hydrogen fuel cells.
Hydrogen can make all the difference between being able to electrify those vessels or not.
Cargo ships often travel far distances.
Well, sometimes they're crossing oceans, right?
And hydrogen, the lightest element on the periodic table, is uniquely suited to help power the ship's long journeys.
Fuel cells can take advantage of hydrogen's properties, being something that is quickly refueled, something you can carry on board a vehicle, and be used in places where battery electrification is impractical for one reason or another.
One reason, batteries can be really heavy. Another, batteries can take a long time to charge.
That may be possible for hovercraft or for ferries, for instance, but for long-haul shipping, it's quite a different story. And what hydrogen gets you is the ability to carry much more energy on board than you would otherwise with batteries.
And in addition to powering cargo ships, hydrogen fuel cell technology can be used to power electric trucks, heavy equipment, and also passenger cars. So, how do hydrogen fuel cells work?
A fuel cell is an electrochemical device. Each individual cell in the stack consists of a membrane that separates hydrogen on one side and air on the other.
And, as Nuvera chief engineer Pierre-François Kay explains, the hydrogen arrives at the membrane, breaks down into protons and electrons, generating power for a motor, all without the need to burn fossil fuels. In fact, they produce no exhaust other than heat and water. But implementation of this technology is no easy feat, with several challenges to overcome.
One of our main challenges that we face is hydration management.
The membrane needs to be hydrated to be permeable to protons, but too much water can cause flooding, and the fuel cell will not operate properly.
So with model-based design using MATLAB and Simulink, we created a model of the fuel cell, and that allowed us to simulate our water management controls in a variety of ambient conditions.
Model-based design. I needed to check with someone from MathWorks, the creator of MATLAB and Simulink, to fully understand what's happening.
Well, companies like Nuvera, who are using MATLAB and Simulink, are using it to model and simulate a complex engineered system. For Nuvera, it's a chemical reaction involving hydrogen as a fuel, which then is combined with air to form an electric current and water.
That's Tony Lennon, the Simscape marketing manager at MathWorks, who explains that model-based design allows Nuvera to virtually simulate how the hydrogen fuel cell will operate in real time and to tackle challenges like hydration management virtually before using physical components.
Not using model-based design means that you're going to be out there testing on real hardware. You run the risk of damaging hardware or not thoroughly testing all the operating envelope that the real equipment's going to see.
And operating real hardware can take a lot of time. Pierre-François Kay again.
There's a huge advantage to simulate all of these conditions in a virtual environment instead of building systems physically, because those are expensive, and every time we need to change a piece of hardware, it takes time.
Saving this time can mean more innovation and, in the case of Nuvera, more fuel cells to power the clean energy transition.
To learn more about MathWorks and Nuvera, and for more stories, check out wbur.org/mathworks.